Hello, welcome to week 5, the midpoint of our 10 weeks together this summer. The recap for week 4 is a reminder to upload your 2 assignments that wrap up our week 4 by today's deadline of Monday, June 24th at 11:55 p.m. And those 2 assignments are your peer feedback to Group 1's presentation as well as your research paper outline. There are forums for each of those assignments, so make sure you get those in. Thanks to everyone who completed the mid-course instructor feedback questionnaire. I did implement one of the suggestions. I'm not sure if I did it as intended, but you should have noticed, or you can go back and take a look. When you open up the week 5 folder, there is one page that has all of the module 5 resources aggregated in one place. So hopefully that makes it easier for you to navigate and find the resources that you're interested in taking a look at. You'll also find those still linked in this PowerPoint as well as in the module 5 book. There's still a separate chapter page for the resources there. And then a little bit carryover from week 3, but the andragogy assignments, infographic assignments have been graded. I have given specific feedback to each of you, so if you have any questions about that, let me know. The learning objectives are focused on our main topic for this week, which is transformative learning theory. And so the objectives are for you to be able to define Mezirow's transformative learning theory, explain the process or phases of transformative learning, determine the suitability of applying transformative learning theory to various learning situations, and to critically reflect on the implications of educator and learner positionality in transformative learning. So that last one isn't really touched on in the chapter, but I have it in there because I think it's really important for us to be paying attention to our own positionality and be mindful that our learners also come to us with their own positionality and what that means. So if this is a term that's new to you, I do have a slide in this deck that will be introduce you to this term and this topic, and hopefully kind of get your wheels spinning and thinking about the role that this positionality plays for us as educators. The required reading is our text, Chapter 5, Transformative Learning. And for those of you who haven't been clicking on the graphic organizer link, you don't know that it changes every week. But for those of you who have been clicking on it this week, everyone will be happy to know that I have filled it out for you this week. And that graphic organizer is a comparison of Mezirow's 10-step process, which is more cognitive rational, where so it lists all of the 10 steps, which you can grab from the chapter, but it's a comparison of those steps to Cranton, who is someone who's been continues to write about transformative learning. She's one of the editors of the Handbook of Transformative Learning, and her approach is really focused around what she terms as phases, and her emphasis is more on the social, emotional, and kind of reflective aspects of the theory while still maintaining the individualistic foundation of the theory. But you should see some differences, and in Cranton you will probably recognize some shift that is mentioned in the theory that Miriam and Barima mentioned in the chapter. Oh, let me go back. Sorry. There's a focus question. It's required. And I think I apologize for any confusion back on DB3, but I do have, to eliminate any confusion, I did set up a separate discussion board forum for that assignment. There's a question related to the reading, and so I would like you to respond to that. And as always, the reflection questions are optional. This week, however, if you are stumped on the focus question, or you just don't like it, or you just don't want to respond to that one, then pick one of the reflection questions. But please do post a thoughtful and reflective response to one of the questions this week. Think of it as your part two. So in some weeks where we have, post your initial response, that's part one, and then post a comment to a peer, that's part two. So your focus question this week is the part two DB. And here are those questions. You'll see them online as well. So I want to make sure that you all feel really comfortable with how transformative learning is being defined and kind of directly from the source. So in Merriam-Webster in chapter 5, if you've read it already, then you know that they include a long quote, as I've done here, of how Mezirow defines transformative learning. But they also spend time in the chapter talking about kind of this evolution of the theory, right? And so even Mezirow, it has been credited with going back and kind of doing some rethinking and reframing of the theory. So this is a 2012 quote. This comes from a chapter that he wrote in the Handbook of Transformative Learning. So this is a quote here. Compare this one to what's in the book and see if you're recognizing some of those shifts that he made based on criticisms of the original theory as he presented it. Here's a quote from Cranton that focuses on recognizing the importance of individuation in the theory. And so really coming out front and just stating that it's a prerequisite of transformative learning, right? Which we understand transformative learning, if you've already read the chapter, that it's, a learner-centered approach. So take a look at this as well. And then this is a quote from an author, who wrote a blog post, and I've linked to this resource. It is titled the same as the slide, Transformative Learning Theory in Action. I try each week to connect you with, like a theory to practice approach. And so this comes from an instructional design focused blog post, and hopefully you'll be able to have some of your thoughts that are coming from the theory side in the chapter and seeing how this instructional designer or his design team is taking the theory and turning it into action. Hence the title. Pardon me. Okay, this slide, this is my effort to bring up this notion of positionality. So this author, Johnson Bailey, isn't referenced in the chapter, but she does in chapter 5 in Merriam-Webster, but she does write a chapter in the Handbook of Transformative Learning, and she talks about positionality. And so she's defining it as the complex and shifting mix of who we think we are and the social locations that others assign us to or place us in. Pardon me. And another definition is that positionality is the social and political context that creates your identity in terms of race, class, gender, sexuality, and ability status. It also describes how your identity influences and potentially biases your understanding of and outlook on the world. So Johnson Bailey is kind of saying the same thing you see in that section, second bullet point, that our social positions affect our view of the world and the way the world views us. I think it's important for us as educators, instructional designers, learning architects, however title you would like to assign yourself in your current or aspirational profession related to the degree that you're earning. But we bring these biases, and I think really in this current climate, they always exist, but I think in this current climate, we're almost on kind of like this crash course, headed smack dab into this reckoning that we need to have with power and positionality and implicit and explicit biases that we carry and bring into learning spaces that we occupy, or actually all spaces, right? As the learner, as the educator. So I want to just draw attention to that. And you see here in my third bullet point, I'm like, if it's true, if we do kind of come with these positions, then what is our responsibility? Or I want to argue that we do have a responsibility to check our positionality and reflect on how it impacts our learners. So, um, even if you think back to the beginning of the course in week 1, where it was optional, but I said, would you like to identify your gender identity preference, right? That's something that I wouldn't have done ever before this year. I'd never done it. This was the first time, but I'm recognizing an awareness to be mindful of inclusiveness, right? So where I my positionality is of a place where I never had to or I never gave thought to what that would mean to create that option for a student to be able to um, feel that it was okay to express that, right? Or to feel that there was, or to recognize that there was a space that it was okay to do that. So that's kind of some change for me, but that's just one example. Excuse me. So if some of you thought that was kind of odd, or what does this mean, or I mean, I think I'm just throwing it out there as kind of one example of where I believe we have a responsibility to always be mindful of how our positions affect others, right? So, in pointing this out, I just wanted to indicate where Johnson Bailey kind of has this criticism of Mezirow's theory, saying that it ignores these filters, right? Because this is all context. This is what we bring. So, if there's a group that's traditionally homogeneous, then they are missing out on an opportunity for alternative perspectives, or as she calls it, not accounting for emotions or alternative forms of knowing. So I just want to point it out because, again, we all have positionality. And what does it mean for us as educators? What does it mean for us as learners? And really just give some thought and attention to that. I think it's important. The Module 5 assignments are, I think, light this week. You are going to submit some peer feedback to Group 2. You are also going to post a focus question, and I'd like you to join our chat. But if you can't, then you can join in week 8. I am really focused on getting your outline feedback to you before the live chat. So if you have any questions about my feedback, then we can address those there. And then additional activities for this week. Write. Make a writing plan. Get a writing schedule. Pace yourself because your draft is due week 6. Here's a list of all the additional resources. Don't let it freak you out. On the in the module book, I've broken it down as 2 separate pages: one of transformative resources and one of these writing resources. And these are just references to the articles. And as always, this PowerPoint will be posted online. Have a great week, everyone. See you, or most of you, on Wednesday.